Okay, let's start with our exponents and scientific notation. All right, it says simplify and write your answer with only positive exponents. That's usually going to be the case. So we need to remember a lot of rules about exponents. Okay, so we're going to look at each base separately, and then we're going to follow the rules of exponents. So I'm going to start by taking 16 over 12, and I am going to simplify that. They both have a factor of 4, so 16 is 4 times 4, and 12 is 3 times 4, so that simplifies to 4 over 3. Now for the C's, there are a couple of ways that you can do this. You can say this is C to the negative 3 minus negative 2. Since we're dividing, we subtract the exponents, which gives us C to the negative 1, which is the same thing as 1 over C. So I'm going to have 1C in the denominator. Then for the D, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to subtract, so this is going to be D to the 1 minus 5, which is D to the negative 4, which becomes 1 over D to the positive 4. And there's my answer. Okay. All right, our next problem. This is going to be dealing with multiplication, so we have to remember what to do here. Well, let's just start by rewriting it, and because we can multiply in any order. So I'm going to change this to negative 3 times 9 times x to the negative 2 times x to the second. I'm just grouping the constants. Or the coefficients. I'm combining the x's, and then I'm going to combine the y's. Okay, so I'm going to do it the same way I did before. Negative 3 times 9 gives me negative 27. X to the negative 2 times x to the second. I'm going to add those exponents, which gives me x to the 0, which is just 1. Y to the second times y to the third is y to the 2 plus 3, which gives me y to the 5th. Or I can just write it more simply as negative 27 y to the 5th. Okay, for 42 there are a couple of ways that you can do that. You can take everything in here to the negative 1 power, but I think what I'd rather do is simplify all this in here and then take it and then just turn it upside down. Okay, so 8 over 24, they both have a factor of 8. So this is going to be 1 times 8 over 3 times 8, which becomes 1 over 3. For the x's, I have x to the negative 4 minus negative 5, which gives me x to the first. So I have an x in the numerator. For the y's, I have y to the first minus third. Since I'm dividing, I subtract the exponents, which gives me y to the negative 2, or 1 over y to the second. So I have a y to the second here, And then I just take everything to the -1 power. So that just means to reverse it, I just take the whole thing and I flip it upside down. So that becomes 3y to the second divided by 1x, or I'm just going to write it as x, to the +1, or just 3y to the second over x. Okay. All right, I'm going to do this in a couple of steps. I think I'm going to start out, I'm going to take everything in here to the second power. So this becomes -3 to the second, x to the third to the second, y to the -4 to the second. And then I'm going to take everything in here to the third power. So this is going to be 2 to the third, x to the third, y to the third. All right, so -3 to the second is -3 times -3, which is 9. 3 times 2 gives me x to the 6th. Remember, a power I multiply. -5 times 2 gives me y to the -8. 2 to the third is 2 times 2 times 2, which gives me 8. X to the third, y to the third. Okay. Now I'm going to need a little bit more room, so I think I'm going to take this on up here and write this as 9 times 8 times y to the, times x, x to the 6th times x to the third times y to the -8 times y to the third. So that gives me 72 x to the 6th plus 3 gives me x to the 9th. -8 plus 3 gives me y to the -5. And of course I have to use positive exponents only. So this becomes 72 x to the 9th divided by y to the 5th. Okay. All right, for 44, this negative outside, remember, if you have negative a over b, that equals negative a over b, or a over negative b. So this outside, I think for simplification, I'm going to put it in the numerator. So I'm going to write this as negative x, 9xy to the third. And here, I'm going to take everything to the second power. So that's -3 to the second, x to the second, y to the third to the second. Okay, so bringing that back down here, this is going to give me -9xy to the third divided by 3 squared. -3 squared is 9. 2 times 2 gives me x to the 4th. 3 times 2 gives me y to the 6th. Okay. All right, so from here, -9 divided by 9 gives me -1. X divided by x to the 4th is x to the 1. Remember, there's an implied 1 there. 1 minus 4, which is x to the -3, which is 1 over x to the third. So my x to the third goes in the denominator. And for my y's, I have y to the 3 minus 6. That's y to the negative 3, or 1 over y to the positive 3. So I have a y to the positive 3 here. And there you have your answer. Okay, perform the indicated operation, write the answer in scientific notation. Okay. All right. Now, we talked about this. I'm going to show you how to do it both on your calculator as well as how to do it the other way. Okay, on your calculator, if you put it into scientific notation mode, okay, and I'm actually going to do that, so I'm going to put it in, into scientific notation mode. So my answer will come back as scientific notation. So I'm just going to do it exactly like it says. 4.3 times 10 to the third, times 8.8 times 10 to the fourth, and on your graphing calculator, this E8 means this is 3.784 times 10 to the 8th. So this just becomes 3.784 times 10 to the 8th. And each calculator is going to look different. Now, if you don't know how to do that on your calculator, or you just want to do it by hand, I would rewrite this as 4.3 times 8.8 times 10 to the third times 10 to the fourth. So if I do 4.3 times 8.8, that's going to give me 37.84 times 10, and I just add the exponent since the bases are the same, to the 7th. Notice these are close, but this is not in scientific notation. I need to move this over one place. Since this is larger than 1, larger than 10, I'm going to have to move it to the left. So this becomes 3.784 times 10 to the first times 10 to the 7th. And then this, I add my exponents, becomes 10 to the 8th. So this is 3.784 times 10 to the 8th. Okay. Same thing here. I've got it in scientific notation mode. So I'm just going to put this in parentheses and divide by this in parentheses. If you don't put the parentheses, you're going to get something honky. Okay, so 6.8 times 10 to the fourth. Oh, and I did it again. Divided by 7.2 times 10 to the 9th. And that gives me 9.444 e to the negative 6. So on my calculator, that just, and I'll just round it. It doesn't say anything about rounding, so I'll just write it as 9.44 times 10 to the negative 6. If I want to do it by hand, I'm going to take 6.8 divided by 7.2 times 10 to the 4th divided by 10 to the 9th. Okay, well 6.8, whoops, divided by 7.2 gives me 0.944, and 4 minus 9 gives me 10 to the negative 5. Well, this is smaller than 1, so I need to move this over 1 decimal place. So this becomes 9.44 times 10 to the negative 1 times 10 to the negative 5. When I add these exponents, that becomes 10 to the negative 6, and I have 9.44 times that. Okay. Okie doke. So on this one, if I put it in my calculator, do it just like it says, 3 times 10 to the 9th times 2 times 10 to the negative 5. I keep doing that. And I get 6E4. So on my calculator, I get 6 times 10 to the 4th. If I do it without a calculator, I'm going to do 3 times 2, 10 to the 9th times 10 to the negative 5. Well, 3 times 2 is 6. 9 plus negative 5 is 10 to the 4th. Since this is between 1 and 10, then I can leave it just like that. Okay, same thing. If I'm going to do this in scientific note in my calculator, I'm going to multiply and then divide by this in parentheses. So I'm going to have 4.2 times 10 to the 6th times 4.4 times 10 to the 23rd divided by 2.2 times 10 to the 9th. And it will give me 8.4 E20. So that's going to be 8.4 times 10 to the 20th. If I want to do it by hand, again, I'm going to do these part first. So I'm going to do 4.2 times 4.4 divided by 2.2. And then I'm going to do 10 to the 6th times 10 to the 23rd divided by 10 to the 9th. Okay, well if I do 4.2 times 4.4 divided by 2.2, I get 8.4. 6 plus 23, so this becomes 10 to the 29th divided by 10 to the 9, and when I subtract those, I get 10 to the 20th. Okay, that's it.